Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Ron at SceneGrinder, and today's video is pretty exciting for us. We're going to be showing you the new character sheet style that we've done, and specifically we'll be showing you how that looks with the 5e implementation we've done. So, a couple things before I get started. First, this is a character sheet, not a character wizard. So this is where you're going to record all the information related to your character, but it doesn't do things like stepping you through creating a new character or leveling a character. We are planning to look at doing that later in the beta, but for right now, it is only a character sheet. And so let me go ahead and get started. So to get to the character sheet, you've got two options. If you select your character and then click X on the keyboard, you can get what we call the quick access view here. And as you can see, you've got your character portrait showing there in the center, and then you got a whole bunch of circles. So the small circles in the top left are standard for every game system, and I'll show those in a minute. And the big ones around the character portrait are specific to your game system. So these are all specific to our 5e implementation. So that's, if you click on one of these, it'll take you to the character sheet. So that's clicking X on the keyboard is how you can do that. Hit out of that. You can also right click on your character, and that will also bring up this view. To see the full character sheet, you can either click one of the circles that I just showed you, or you can double click on your character portrait, and that will bring up the full character sheet. So getting into the full character sheet, the first thing we notice is that it does take up most of the map. And we did that intentionally because we wanted to give you as much room as possible to see when you've got a lot of information that you want to look at. But keep in mind, SceneGrinder is a browser application, and you can run as many instances of SceneGrinder as you want to. So if you're one of those people like me that opens their character sheet and then immediately closes it, having it block the screen for a few seconds isn't a big deal. But if you're one of those people that likes to keep the character sheet open a lot while you're playing, then you'll probably want to do something like either open another tab and put it on the second monitor if you've got it, or you could have a different tab on the same browser that you're in. They can just switch back and forth between the browser tabs. You can also open two browser tabs and run them side by side. Let me give you a demo of how that could look. Here you go. So in this case, this is just two different instances of SceneGrinder running. On the left-hand side, I've got the map, so I can look and see what's going on in the game. And then on the right-hand side, I've got my character sheet open, so I can quickly get that information there. So lots of options. It's completely up to you how you want to use SceneGrinder. And so now I'm going to switch back to the full screen view. And let's talk about the character sheet itself for a few minutes. Now, I'm not going to go over all of the pages, but I'm going to hit a few in particular. So starting on the top left, which is settings. So this is where you will choose the image for your character. You can choose from one of the free SceneGrinder models that we've made available to use as your character model. You can also pull in a Hero Forge model if you've got an account there. For GMs, if you were a GM, I'm currently logged in as a player, but if you were a GM, there'd be a button here where you could assign a character to a player. And so that's how you will get people into your games. And there's a few other fields. Next screen is really important. This is checks, and you probably heard us talk about this before. So basically what we do is when you enter all of your character information, we scan through that, and then we pull out everything that could potentially result in a die roll, and we put it here. So, of course, the big advantage to this is you don't need to hunt and peck through your character sheet to get to the spot to find out, like, how do you cast a magic missile. You can just go to the checks page, and it'll all be there. And by the way, you can also have up to 10 hotkeys for these as well. So one more thing about this checks page is you see a lot of these options have a little red square with an eye in it. And when the game system gives us permission to do so, we include additional information about whatever it is you're doing. So in this case, for Acid Splash, I can click on that information box and I can get all the detailed information about it. And just so you know, this information is not only available on your character sheet. If you go to make a die roll, it's available on the die roll page, and it's also available for the GM in the journal when they're applying the results of an action. So very, very handy thing to remember. All right, so that's the checks page. The mods page. So this is where you can add die roll modifiers that you can potentially use on the die roll screen. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the checks page real quick and show you how the modifiers look. So I'll click like I'm casting my magic missile. You can see it's got a base check there of d4 plus 1, which is down here in my dice pool. But you can see these modifiers here that I added, those two custom ones, I can now at any time choose to add them to my die roll, and then when I do a roll, it will automatically get added into the result. So you can see in this case, I'm doing my magic missile. So you see in this case, I did my magic missile. I rolled a 3 on the d4 plus a standard 1, and my Chosen of Lorth gives me 2 more for a total of 6. And by the way, just a quick mention, here's also that information box on the die roll page that I mentioned before. All right, so that was adding custom mods that you can use on die rolls. The effects page, this is where you'll be able to do things like set up effects for different spells, ultravision, night vision, lanterns, that sort of thing. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the beta, so just know that it's there right now. It does work, but we want to make a few more changes before we roll it out for everybody. So these are the standard 4. So now, like I said, I'm just going to hit a few of the game system specific pages, and this is for the 5e pages. But starting with general, so what you've got is fields. If you can edit a field, you see it's got that little underline underneath it. So I've got my maximum hit points. I can change it here. And by the way, you can also change your current hit points directly on your avatar, which we'll get into that later when we talk about encounters. I can add temporary hit points, hit dice. Now, currently, we do not calculate the hit dice based on your character levels. We may be adding that later in the beta, but for right now, you will need to enter that in. Armor class, I'll show you how to set that in a few minutes. And the key thing to note here is if it's got an underline, you can edit. If it doesn't, then that means it's defaulted based on the information in the character sheet. All right, so let me go to a couple of other screens. So first I'll go to class info. And so here's where you can add the different classes. So you can see right now I'm set up as a first level paladin and a 5th level sorcerer. The way you would add a class is just click the drop down, say I want to also be a monk, and then I'll click add. If you want to delete something, just look for the trash can. In this case I've got paladin there twice, so I'll go ahead and delete it. And so in order to add a monk level, I just click here on the underline and say I'm a 2nd level monk. All right, so that's the class page. Let's see, other important pages to show you. Spellbook. The spellbook's very important. The way it works is you add a spellbook for each class that you want to. So in this case, I've added a spellbook for my sorcerer class and also for my paladin class. And when you add a spellbook, a couple things happen. First, for that particular class, we go ahead and default this information, and you can see we're defaulting for sorcerer, it's charisma. I've got an attribute bonus of 2, proficiency bonus of 3 based on my level. Gives me a base spell DC of 13. This spell DC bonus, if there's something that gives me a bonus, I can go ahead and bump it up here. I've got a +3 bonus, which then bumps my spell DC up to 16. And you can see we have a spell grouping for 0 level and 1 through 9. And to add a spell to your spellbook is pretty simple. Just click on the spell, and of course I'll add a fireball, and then click add. And when you do, you can see it opens up that spell slot level, and then you can see the list here. Now, like I mentioned before, here's the information button. So if you want to get more information about your fireball spell, you can do it here. Really important column here is prepared. If this is set to yes, then it'll show on that checks page I was talking about before. Attack damage type, we go ahead and default this based on the spell. That's all built into the customization. Basically, this just controls if we pop up the die roll screen and if we pop it up just for an attack or for attack and damage. But again, this will default based on the spell. And as you can see here, if the spell like Vampiric Touch is, you have to make an attack roll for it, we go ahead and default the appropriate dice to use there. And you can see for Fireball, we're defaulting the standard damage on it. Obviously, you'll be able to change this if you're casting it as a higher level. And we default in the casting time as well. So that is the spell book page. A couple other things I want to hit before I wrap it up. Let me see, I mentioned armor. So by default, the armor is 0, so you will need to add some kind of armor in order to get your armor class set. So even if you're unarmored, then you just need to enter unarmored down here. To add an armor class, sorry, to add armor, just do like I showed you before. Just select the item from the list, click add, and it gets added down here. The armor type is listed in the second column, and you can put a name here if you want to. And you can see right now that this is heavy armor, and so we recognize that since it's heavy armor, you don't get a dex bonus. So your armor class is going to be 18. Armor bonus, this is if it's like magical armor or something like that that gives you a plus to it. And then over here you've got the equipped. So if I go ahead and I equip this, and so now if I flip back to my general tab where it was set to 0 before, it's now showing an armor class of 18. So again, just to get your character armored, all you need to do is go to the armor page and select and equip the appropriate armor. Okay, I'm going to show you one more page, and that'll be attacks. So for attacks, it's pretty straightforward. All you do, again, is you just select the type of attack, and I'll go ahead and do Great Axe, and click Add. And as you can see, when you do that, it defaults to the weapon type of the Great Axe. The edit name here, we don't populate it by default, but this is what's going to show on the checks page. So you will want to put a name here for your attack. And also just a quick note, this is for entering the attack information. This is not equipment. There's an equipment down here where you'd add your actual equipment. So getting back to the Great Axe I just added, as you can see, it defaults to damage type to slashing, range of 5. Of course, it's 5e, so the attack rolls a d20. And then you've got these things over here called attack mods. So attack mods, I'm just going to click on this add mods option. So this is where you can add modifiers that will default when you're doing a die roll. And if you do the single check, that means it'll show on the die roll screen, but it won't default for the dice. If you do the double click, the double arrow, that means it'll default on the roll. So I'll just go ahead and do the double arrow. And again, here's where I could add these custom modifiers that I'd entered in earlier. Then you've got damage. We default it based on the weapon type. And then damage mods works the same as attack mods. Let's go ahead and put that in there. And also select proficiency. And there you go. So again, when you're adding an attack, you select from the drop-down, click add. You will want to set the name, so that'll show on the checks page. And then you also want to enter in the attack mods and the damage mods associated with it. And if you've got a weapon that can be used multiple ways, what you would do is add it multiple times and then set the information as appropriate for each way you're going to use the weapon. Okay, so that concludes this video. If you have any questions about how to use the 5e character sheet or character sheets in general, then always feel free to use the support option and reach out to us. And you can also check the knowledge base to see if you've got the answers to your questions there. And that's all for today. So happy gaming, everybody. Bye.